Picture this for a moment. A country where April 15th doesn't matter anymore. No IRS letters, no tax forms, no scrambling for receipts. A nation where the government doesn't reach into your paycheck before you even see it. And while that alone sounds like a headline from the future, it's actually something President Trump just brought directly into the national spotlight. But that's not all. Because on the very same week, he unveiled something else. Something so big, so historic, that it could reshape the lives of an entire generation of American children. A new program, record-breaking private donations, and an economic shift that almost nobody saw coming. And just as these announcements were landing, Costco launched a massive lawsuit against the administration, pushing back on tariffs and raising serious questions about what comes next for prices, American companies, and the future of U.S. manufacturing. So today, we're diving into the major move Trump just made, the economic shockwaves that followed, and what all of this means for you, your family, and America's future. Stay with me, because once you see how these pieces connect, the picture becomes absolutely stunning. Let's start with what happened in the Oval Office. Trump sat down, looked into the camera, and said something that most politicians would never dare to say out loud. The federal income tax, as we know it, might be going extinct. Not reduced, not reformed, extinct. Now, if you're like most Americans, your first thought was probably, wait, how is that even possible? And that's a fair question. After all, income tax has been part of American life for over a century. It funds everything from roads to military operations to Social Security checks. So how could it just disappear? Here's the thing. Trump isn't suggesting we stop funding the government. What he's proposing is a return to the way America operated for the first 70 years of its existence before income tax was ever introduced. Back then, the federal government raised money almost entirely through tariffs. That means taxes on goods coming into the country from overseas, not taxes taken out of your paycheck before you even see it. And once you understand why Trump chose this moment to say it, everything else, including the lawsuit and the historic donation, suddenly fits together. Because the truth is, the current system isn't just broken, it's collapsing. Let me explain what I mean. The Internal Revenue Service, the IRS, is the agency responsible for collecting taxes and enforcing tax law. It's one of the most powerful agencies in the federal government. But over the past several years, something alarming has been happening behind the scenes. The IRS has been bleeding people. Staffing levels in enforcement have dropped by more than a third. Think about that for a second. A third of the people who used to make sure taxes were collected properly are just gone. And the effects are showing up in the numbers. Right now, the IRS is only able to audit around 2/5 of all tax revenue. That's an all-time low. Since the year before the last presidential election, for every single dollar of new tax revenue that comes into the federal government, Washington has added more than $150 in new spending. Let that sink in. $1 in, $158 out. I don't know what kind of math they're using in Washington, but in the real world, that's called bankruptcy. Our national debt is now climbing by around $1 trillion every 100 days. $1 trillion every 100 days. At that pace, we're not just in trouble. We're in a death spiral. And the old system, the one built on income tax and endless borrowing, simply cannot survive. The tax code itself has become a monster. It's over 4 million words long. 4 million. That's not a system designed to raise revenue efficiently. It's a system designed for political favors, loopholes, and special interests. It doesn't matter how many more words you add to it. 6 million words won't fix it. 8 million won't fix it. The system itself is broken. And that's precisely where Trump's tariff plan comes in. Because if the IRS is collapsing, and the debt is exploding, and the tax code is a 4 million word joke, then maybe it's time to go back to what actually worked. For the first 70 years of this country's existence, from the founding until just after the Civil War, the federal government was funded almost entirely by tariffs. And during that era, America became an economic superpower. Trump's proposal to swap income tax for tariffs is a pivot back to that model. Instead of taxing American labor, you tax foreign consumption. Instead of chasing down hundreds of millions of Americans for tax forms every year, the government collects revenue at the ports. It's simpler, it's more transparent, and it puts the burden on trade, not on paychecks. Now, critics are quick to say that tariffs alone can't replace income tax revenue. They argue that tariffs won't cover the nearly $5 trillion the government spends every year. And they're right if spending stays the same. But that's the quiet part of the plan. Moving to a tariff-based system forces a reckoning. It caps the government's ability to spend endlessly. It starves the beast. It forces permanent cuts to waste, fraud, and abuse. The government can no longer politicize the tax code by promising to tax the top 1% or exempting this group or that group. All of that ends. The government has to live within its means, within a capped system of revenue that can't be gained or manipulated. The writing is on the wall. The IRS is shrinking. The debt is exploding. The current tax system is mathematically unsustainable. Whether it happens next year or in the next decade, the transition away from income tax is coming. Trump has just accelerated the timeline. And while all of this was unfolding, Trump unveiled a second totally unexpected announcement, one aimed not at Washington, but at America's children. He called it the Trump Accounts Program. And here's how it works. Every child born in the United States between the years 2025 and 2028 will receive $1,000 deposited into an investment account tied to the overall stock market. That money will grow, compound, and accumulate until the child turns 18. At that point, it becomes their property, fully private, fully theirs. Now, if you're doing the math in your head, you're probably thinking, okay, $1,000 is nice, but it's not life-changing. And you'd be right if it just sat there, but it doesn't, because this isn't a handout. It's an investment. And over the course of 18 years with compounding returns, that $1,000 could grow into tens of thousands. If the child and their family keep contributing, it could grow into hundreds of thousands, and over a lifetime, it could reach well into the millions. This is America teaching investment from birth. It's a populist policy in the truest sense. It gives every child, regardless of background, a stake in the American economy, a reason to care about markets, about growth, about building wealth. And it does it without creating another government welfare program. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Because this program didn't just come from the government. It came with one of the largest private donations in American history. Michael and Susan Dell, the founders of Dell Technologies, announced that they would be contributing over $6 billion through their charitable funds to jumpstart the Trump Accounts program. Not 6 million, 6 billion with a B. And their contribution isn't just for the babies being born in the next few years. It's also for children who are already here, kids under the age of 10, living in communities where the median household income is around $150,000 or less. Each of those children will receive an initial deposit of $250 into their own Trump account. Now, why does this matter? Because it shows that the private sector is willing to step up and invest in America's future. And if the Dell family is leading the way, who's to say other billionaires won't follow? Or any number of wealthy Americans who want to leave a legacy that actually helps the next generation. Suddenly, you're not talking about a modest government program. You're talking about a transformational wealth building movement. And the reaction to this program, well, that's where things get interesting. Supporters are calling it a game changer. They point out that when a child turns 18, they won't just have money for college. They'll have options. They can use it for home ownership. They can use it to start a small business. They can use it to invest further. It gives them freedom. It gives them hope. It gives them a real shot at building generational wealth without being trapped in debt. For seniors especially, this is exciting, because it means your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren won't start life in the red. They'll start with something, a foundation, a head start. And in a world where student debt and housing costs have crushed so many young people, that head start could make all the difference. But not everyone sees it that way, and that brings us to the critics. Some argue that pumping billions of dollars into the stock market through these accounts could be inflationary, that it could drive up asset prices, particularly stocks related to the companies managing the funds. Others question, who exactly will be managing this money? Is it the government? Is it a private company? Who's responsible if something goes wrong? And then there are those who claim this is just a political stunt, a way to win votes by promising money to families. Now, let's address those concerns fairly. First, the inflation worry. Yes, adding billions to the market has an effect, but the program is designed to spread that capital over years, even decades. It's not a sudden dump. It's a steady, long-term flow. And because the money is tied to index funds that track the overall market, it's not concentrated in any one sector. So while there may be some upward pressure on prices, it's likely to be gradual and manageable. Second, the management question. The accounts are being powered by a private entity called Invest America in partnership with the federal government. The structure is designed so that families maintain control, but the investments themselves are professionally managed and transparent. It's not a black box. It's a trust fund model that's been used successfully in other contexts for decades. And third, the political mode of argument. Look, every major policy announcement has a political dimension. That's just reality. But dismissing this program as vote buying misses the bigger picture. Because if it works, if it actually helps millions of kids build wealth and achieve financial independence, does the motive really matter? What matters is whether it delivers. And so far, the early indicators are promising. And just when all of this seemed like enough news for 1 week, Costco stepped in with something nobody expected. The big box retailer, known for bulk groceries and unbeatable deals, filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration, demanding refunds for tariff costs. Not a few $1 million, potentially billions. And they're not alone. Dozens of other companies have filed similar suits. But Costco is by far the biggest and most recognizable name to challenge the White House directly. So, what's going on here? Why is Costco suing? And what does it mean for you and your wallet? Here's the backstory. As part of his economic strategy, Trump imposed tariffs on a wide range of imported goods, using emergency powers under a law from the late 1970s. The idea was to encourage American manufacturing, protect domestic industries, and bring jobs back home. Tariffs make foreign goods more expensive, which theoretically makes American-made goods more competitive. But here's the catch. Companies like Costco rely heavily on imports. Roughly a third of the products they sell come from overseas. Everything from electronics to clothing to food, including things like shrimp from places like India. So when tariffs go up, Costco has a choice. Absorb the cost and take a hit to profits, or pass it along to customers and risk losing business. Neither option is great, but Costco isn't just complaining. They're taking legal action. Their lawsuit argues that Trump's use of emergency powers to impose these tariffs was unlawful. They're asking a federal trade court to rule that the tariffs were imposed illegally. And if the Supreme Court eventually agrees, Costco wants every penny they paid in tariffs refunded. Now, there's a deadline involved here. Costco had until mid-December to file this lawsuit or risk losing the ability to claim refunds later. So they filed, and now the case is moving forward. This is significant for a few reasons. First, it's rare for a major public company to directly challenge a sitting president in court over economic policy. Most corporations work behind the scenes, lobbying quietly, negotiating deals. But Costco went public. That tells you how seriously they're taking this. Second, the Supreme Court has already shown skepticism about whether the president has the authority to impose sweeping tariffs under emergency powers. Most of the justices sounded doubtful during oral arguments in related cases. So Costco might actually have a shot at winning. But here's the tricky part. Even if the Supreme Court rules in Costco's favor, it's not clear how the refunds would work. Would every company that paid tariffs get their money back? Or only the handful that filed lawsuits in time? And where would that money come from? The government doesn't exactly have a surplus sitting around. One of the justices raised this exact concern. She asked, essentially, how do we unscramble this egg? Because once tariffs are collected and spent, reversing them isn't simple. It's not just a matter of cutting a check. It could create a massive fiscal mess. So, what does this lawsuit actually mean for you and your wallet? Let's talk about tariffs and prices in plain terms. When the government puts a tariff on imported goods, it raises the cost for companies like Costco to bring those products into the country. Now, Costco can either eat that cost or pass it along to you at checkout. Most of the time, they pass at least some of it along. So, if you've noticed that certain items at Costco are a bit more expensive than they used to be, tariffs are likely part of the reason, not the only reason. There's also inflation, supply chain issues, labor costs, but tariffs are definitely in the mix. Now here's where it gets interesting. Tariffs aren't just about raising prices, they're also about encouraging companies to change their behavior. If it becomes too expensive to import shrimp from India, maybe an American shrimp farm becomes competitive again. If it's cheaper to manufacture electronics in Ohio than to ship them in from overseas, maybe factories start coming back. That's the theory. Anyway, in practice, it takes time. Companies don't just flip a switch and start manufacturing domestically overnight. It requires investment, planning, and often years of infrastructure build-out. So, in the short term, tariffs can mean higher prices. In the long term, they could mean more jobs and stronger American industries. But here's the dilemma. If you're on a fixed income, you care about prices now. You can't wait 5 years for factories to rebuild. You need affordable groceries, affordable medicine, affordable everyday goods today. And that's why the affordability debate has become so emotional and so central to this entire conversation. So, let's talk about affordability, because this is where things get real for millions of American families. According to recent data from one of the country's largest banks, nearly a quarter of American households are now living paycheck to paycheck.